The boys are going freshwater fishing in Nashville.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team every single day. My name, Erica L. Ayala, your host of Locked On Kraken, also the founder of Black Rosie Media, where we empower Black women and melanated creators in sports media. You can also find me these days talking a lot of women's hoops over at CBS Sports. WNBA Finals Game 3 tomorrow. Want to let you know before we get into it all, today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Now, you can place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's when you visit FanDuel.com. That's, once again, visit FanDuel.com to get started. And you might see I brought my pirate hat back out. For those everydayers and OGers, you know I have an extensive hat collection. And I was ready to go with a Mets hat to support my favorite baseball team. But we'll get into why I'm wearing this particular hat for those watching on YouTube. It's my pirate hat. I call it my Uma hat. But we'll get into that. But it's a game day, Seattle Kraken fans. That's right. The Kraken finish up their road tour, their stretch away from CPA tonight against Nashville. Now, the Nashville Predators 0-2 to start the season. We know the Seattle Kraken, of course, got that one win, took extra time, and are licking our wounds after being shut out by Dallas. But there you go. Kraken have 2 points on the board. The Preds still looking to gain some in the standings. Leading scorer right now, Eberle for us, Philip Forsberg for the Predators. Power play, 14% for the Seattle Kraken, 11% for the Preds, 71.4% PK, much better PK at 83.3% for the Nashville Predators. Now, so much to talk about today. The Dallas game really wasn't what anyone wanted. Brendan Montour talked after the game saying that, he felt it was sleepy. That's a term that I use here on Locked On Kraken. Back-to-back goals for the Dallas Stars in that first frame. And then that's all she wrote. But, when you give up 2 goals in what is it? 13 seconds of each other. That's just not the focus. And that's what we heard Jaden Schwartz and Dan Bylsma talk a little bit about today. That there's a lack of focus at times. And that's some of that Kraken crap seeping in. I don't think that is indicative of the Dan Bylsma era. I think it's indicative of some bad habits that continue to creep in. And so now I think the task that Dan Bylsma, but honestly more so Jordan Eberle and the rest of the captains are going to have to figure out is how to keep this team focused. It's hard to really give too much critique or criticism at this point in the season just because there's a lot of newness. We've talked about that. There's a lot of newness here. There's a lot that we still are figuring out about this Seattle Kraken team. And so even though I showed the comps for both teams, I still think that we want to focus more so on the Seattle Kraken. So the 5-4 win final in an overtime shootout. The Seattle Kraken were able to get that win. They had to gut out the win. And in that game against Minnesota, we see that in that game also, the Seattle Kraken allowed the other team to score first. It was Matt Zuccarello and then Matt Boldy, who, if you listen to our crossover episode with Seth Tuple, then we talked about that for Friday's episode. So not surprised to see Matt Boldy on the board. And then Eberle with 2, including a power play goal. So we like that. Kirill Kaprizov also got on the board. Loved seeing Ty Cartier get on the board. Bjorkstrand and Eberle coming up in the shootout. The shootout has been something that hasn't been fantastic for the Seattle Kraken, I think, overall. And so Joey Dax in net for our first win. That is something that we are going to see again today. We have confirmation. I believe it was Jeff Baker. Was it Jeff who tweeted? I think it was Jeff. It was either Jeff or Bob Condor who tweeted out that we will see Joey Decord. And effectively, we're seeing the teams alternate. Kate Shefty tweeted that the teams are effectively going to alternate goaltenders. And, I think that's fine for now. I think once we get through maybe the next homestand, which is coming up, we'll talk a little bit about that. I might want to see the Seattle Kraken maybe settle into a go-to guy. I don't know, though, if that's something that we're going to see from Dan Bylsma, because we've talked about that. He said that he wants to keep things fluid. And that also lends itself to what we will see as far as the defensive pairs and the forward lines. We know that Vince Dunn, day to day. That was the first thing that Dan Bylsma said today. And then he also talked about between the game against Dallas and today's game that he just felt that he wasn't quite getting what he wanted from the Stevenson line. And he was asked the question, why switching up the forward lines a little bit? Now, on the one hand, we've talked about this. Dan Bylsma said he's not going to be overly committed to defensive pairings, forward lines, things of that nature, even goaltending, which I just alluded to. So on the one hand, you have that. On the other hand, if things aren't working, then we need to experiment and maybe stick with something that is working a little bit more. So we're in that uncomfortable stage right now. As someone who's growing her hair out, I'm in that uncomfortable stage where I really just want to chop it off, and that's probably what I'm going to do. But if I just keep it growing a little bit longer, then it will have the length and I'll have a little bit more variety. Now, of course, we don't have to talk about my hair for an extended period of time, but that's the give and take. You can either reset every once in a while or just go through the growing pains, see what you have on the other end, and it might give you more options. So for the Seattle Kraken, going into game 4, I think we have to, again, injuries are going to dictate, especially what we see on the defensive side. I'm okay with a little bit of experimentation on the forward line, because we do have to see what's going to stick, because the Seattle Kraken right now, I think, want a little bit more on the offensive side. And again, that's what Dan Bylsma said with regard to why he changed up the lines a little bit in that game against Dallas. Right now, the Seattle Kraken have scored 6 goals. They've let in 9 goals. Of our 6 goals, none have come in the first frame. So again, we go back to maybe some Kraken crap, not starting the game off solid. I'd like to see the team be able to switch that, to flip that switch and be able to start off hot. You got to. We have scored no goals in the first period. We've given up 3 goals in the first frame. We've given up the most goals, though, in the second frame. That's also, though, where we've scored the most. So that's a even wash. 4 goals for us, 4 goals for our opponents overall. And it's the same in the third period. So what this even early tells me, and this fits the trend of the Seattle Kraken, is that we have to get off to a good start. So one of my keys to the game is absolutely getting off to a good start, having that juice, as Dan Bylsma would say, early in the game, because the Seattle Kraken just aren't doing enough early on in the game, and it's something that I think they can improve upon. Now, here are some interesting notes with regard to how some of our players have played against the Nashville Predators. First, we're going to start with Chandler Stevenson, averaging better than a point per game in his career against the Preds with 19 points. The split is 6 goals, 13 assists in 14 games against Nashville. Shares first among active Kraken skaters in assists and ranks second in points. Eberle is the other current Kraken member with 13 assists with Chandler Stevenson. Jaden Schwartz enters today's game with 8 goals and 17 points in 35 career games versus Nashville. But the player that everyone is looking to watch, including Dan Bylsma, is Eeli Tolvanen. He's got 1 goal this season, so we're looking for him to get hot. But we're going to see Eeli Tolvanen on the power play, and I already went over some of those numbers, the power play, special teams overall, because the PK is not great right now either. Eeli Tolvanen, and the reason that we're going to see him on the power play, it's something that the team spent a lot of time during morning skate focused on. Eeli Tolvanen going to be on one of the power play units, and a part of it is because of his shot. Dan Bylsma wants that heavy shot. And I think it goes also into something that Jaden Schwartz spent a lot of time talking about today, that he feels that the Seattle Kraken need to get shots a little bit closer to net. He feels that they're working from the outside a little bit too much. And that's something that also has been a part of that Kraken crap that we've talked about. So to Jaden Schwartz's point here, we're looking at, this is the game against Dallas. You can see the heat map here for the Seattle Kraken. A little bit of a blip, but also just a lot of time outside, not getting into the slot area. I think they did, not as good of a job as Dallas did in keeping, we didn't do a good enough job keeping Dallas out of the slot. They did a better job. And then if we also take a look at the heat map for the Minnesota game, a little bit more of a blip here in the slot for the Seattle Kraken. So I like that. You see a goal right here in front, a goal from the face-off circle, but a lot of traffic in front of the goaltenders. And, I want to get into that point a little bit more, especially as we get deeper into the season, but I'm going to give an early assessment. So my takeaways really for this game against Nashville, I want to see us start early, command early. A key player, I think, is going to be Eeli Tolvanen, not just because he might have some extra juice going up against Nashville. We've talked about that story ad nauseum, him being placed on waivers, picked up by the Seattle Kraken, but also because he's going to be new to the power play. And yeah, I think Joey Daccord in net. Those are kind of my 3 keys. Start early. Be better on special teams, especially the power play. That's where Eeli Tolvanen comes in. And then we got to get some more help. We got to be more defensively sound and make sure that our goaltenders are locked in. But coming up on Locked On Kraken, let's talk about an early assessment. I've alluded to some of these points, but we're going to really dive in here. Should we see one goaltender for a stretch of time? Is this team better, not just on paper, but now in reality? Are they a better team than last year? Let's talk about that and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken, as I mentioned at the top of the show, brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Now, NFL fans, I'm talking to you. You can start the season with a big return at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, just go to FanDuel.com, where you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the very same page where you will eventually place your bets. And speaking of placing that bet, a $5 bet will get you started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's win, lose, something in the middle. I don't know. Who cares? You place a $5 bet, $5 or more over at FanDuel.com, and you will get $200 back in bonus bets. So visit FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com And again, 87.5, those are the odds that we talked about in the preseason. I see some people bumping that up to 95 wins. You think we're going to get 95 or more wins? What's your over under, Kraken fans? Let me know. But again, check out all the action over at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala here, wearing my pirate hat. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. Yeah, I feel some kind of way about the Davy Jones hat going by the wayside. And again, we'll talk about it. But I've got my pirate hat. Like I said at the beginning of the show, we're ready to go freshwater fishing in Nashville. But we also heard from Jaden Schwartz that this is going to be a hungry Nashville team. They made a big splash, nautical pun intended, a few big splashes in the off season. And that's something that we heard Dan Bilesma talk about specifically. And, they're going to be hungry. They have not quite gotten it all together as far as to get the results that they want on the ice. So this is going to be a scrappy Nashville team. We've spoiled their party a time or two. And, I don't expect them to just, to roll over. We've got to take it to this Nashville team. And so I mentioned at the top of the show, I want to see how we start. Obviously, how we finish is just as important. But, assessments early on. We're going into game 4 tonight. I do think some bad habits are still seeping and rolling over, which is interesting because we have some roster movement, right? Shane Wright, Riker Evans, Chandler Stevenson, Brandon Montour. So, what is it that is kind of the carryover? Why is it that this Seattle Kraken team in its early franchise history just has a little bit of trouble getting the juice, letting the juice loose early in the game? I had a theory and I leaned into this fully. I didn't like how much Dave Haxtell canceled practice and stuff like that. We have, we've seen the Kraken go this morning skate. I didn't like that under Dave Haxtell. I've said before, I don't think that training camp and preseason was physically demanding enough to start. I didn't think that this year. So what's the rub? I don't think it's not that we can't hang physically. This is more of a mental block. The Seattle Kraken have to, I hate throwing away the C word, confidence. Just because I think that's a little tough. That's maybe not fair to talk about someone else's confidence, but composure, focus. You have to come in focused and ready to go. And that's something that I still think is missing from this Kraken squad. That being said, I think it was Jaden Schwartz said that what we do, and actually it was Montour, I believe, talking about that Dallas game and having to come back and fight back. So some of that moxie, as I would say, or some of that sandpaper, piss and vinegar, or juice, as Dan Bilesma would say, there is some of that there. But what is interesting is that another thing that seems to be a tag for this Kraken franchise early in its existence is that we can meet our opponent at their energy level, but we don't always meet and match an opponent at their energy level, but we're not always the ones initiating. And that is something Dan Bilesma said he wants from this team. He wants them to be, I think, didn't want to use the word instigate, but he wants this team to be the initiators. And I don't think we've seen enough of that from this Kraken squad. I'd be very curious to hear what Dan Bilesma thinks of that, because for me, you talk about juice, you talk about playing fast. A part of that, is forechecking. but and fun, but you have to have that mentality innate within you. And I think there's a little bit of conservative, a little bit of reluctance still from this Kraken team to go all Kraken. I want them to just Kraken out. And we haven't seen that game yet. It can't just be in desperation. It can't just be when a series is on the line. You have to find the beast within. You have to release the Kraken. And I don't think Seattle has quite released the Kraken yet this season. Still playing a little conservative. Now, these are all things that are fixable. That's what Jaden Schwartz said. That's what Brendan Montour said. That is what we continue to hear from Dan Bilesma. And these are also things that you don't want to have to be reminded of so early in the season. The season just started. It's like I used to say about how are we not physically fit? How are we getting skated around so early in the season? The season just started. Everyone, aren't we? Is it October yet? Yes, it is October. It is October right now. So get after it. What are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? There's just a hesitance, a reluctancy to to play fun, fast, and free with some forechecking. I want to see more of it. Now, I'm getting a little excitable because I'm an excitable person. It's not a concern. It's just like you want to shake someone. I used to, for the everydayers and OGers, you got to wake up the bats or wake up the sticks. The Seattle Kraken are not doing a lot of things, I would say, poorly right now, but this is the margin of error that you cannot afford for a team trying to get back to the playoffs. These games are significant to reestablish, get the engine running and purring the way you want. So you expect a little bit of inconsistency early on, but some things you just don't want to have to coach. You don't want to have to talk about so early in the season. And under Dave Haxtell, I was talking about fitness and conditioning. And I don't know, it's still a little early in my estimation, but moxie, heart, guts, grit, sandpaper. I expected a little bit more with more consistency. And it's just an observation right now. It's not a full-blown concern. It's an observation. So in Smashville, I want to see just that. I want to see the Kraken smashing the puck. We have to be able to win the battle for shots on goal. That was something that I think stood out in that Dallas game, especially. So again, observations, early assessment, not anything to overly worry about, just keeping an eye on it. I think the Kraken are inconsistent with the energy, and the ability to take their game to their opponent as opposed to reacting to what the opponent gives them. That's huge. And I want to see that start to turn around. And I think we're going to have a reason to bring that kind of energy because, again, Nashville's starting 0-2, not where they want to be. They have a better PK than us. The power play, not really great for either team. But again, on paper, both of these teams are better. And on paper, a lot of people really liking the moves that the Nashville Predators made. So if only for pride alone, and this is what I think the Seattle Kraken are mindful of, they're getting the Nashville Predators at a time where their pride is on the line. Is that how the Seattle Kraken locker room is taking the last 3 games? There's some pride on the line here. And I think that could make for really exciting hockey. We will obviously talk about the result on our next episode. But coming up, so long, Davy Jones, tipping our cap to the Davy Jones hat, which is why I'm wearing this hat today. We'll talk about what the heck is going on with the post-game celebrations, and is this just a Kraken thing, or is it something that's going around the NHL? We'll talk about that and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by Hims. Now, if you haven't heard of Hims, Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatment from the comfort of your couch, because your sex life is important. But if your schedule is anything like mine, it's pretty busy. You don't have time maybe to go to the doctor and to talk about maybe your performance. Through Hims, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra, Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication will ship directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/locked on. That's HIMS.com/LOCKEDON for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/locked on. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website details for important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. All right, Kraken fans, it's a game day. And yeah, I've got my hat on. Now, I wouldn't call this a Davy Jones hat. It is a pirate hat. The Davy Jones hat, Jerry Bruckheimer, one of the owners of the Seattle Kraken, saw that there was a pirate hat floating around and then gave like a movie prop, like caliber hat to the team. Great hat. Great story Allison Lucan did on the Davy Jones hat. If you saw the Seattle Kraken social media after the great win against the Minnesota Wild, first you would have heard Eberle say that's a freaking gutsy win. I mean, he had other words. They were bleeped out or, muted or whatever the case is. But that's kind of what I was talking about. Early assessment is that there's not consistency there. And we've got one win, took us to overtime and a shootout, and then 2 losses. So we need more of that. And that's what Eberle was saying in his speech. But you also see that he has this belt. It's, listen, in hockey locker rooms, I've covered hockey at a lot of different levels. The kind of WWE belt is very popular. But there might be something to this one. This one's got the NHL emblem, the WWE emblem. And so Kate Shefty has a great article up for the Seattle Times. With the Davy Jones hat retired, Kraken debut a new post-game tradition. Now, Eberle talks about this and says this is the belt is going to be the trophy for this year. And apparently, Eberle himself, according to Dan Bylsma, had something to do with what the prize would be. And Eberle said Bylsma got to choose or was the brains behind it. Either way, there's also a lot of people who have deduced that, WWE and the NHL have a partnership of sorts. And so, this might be something to forge that partnership as opposed to being something that is unique to each member of the National Hockey League. So this is what Shefty writes. Some suspicious fans suspected this could be product placement. This week, WWE announced an NHL-inspired WWE Legacy title belt featuring the official colors and branding of all 32 teams that would be made available to fans as part of a multi-year licensing deal struck by the National Hockey League and the WWE. These belts, $550 US. I would pay probably more than $550 for that Davy Jones hat, but I'm not paying anything close to that amount for a WWE belt. One, I think they're kind of corny and overrated. We've seen it for a while. I loved the Davy Jones hat. So, you know, I honestly am I'm a little bit stuck as where to even go with this, because I'm put out. I'm upset just like everyone else. I think it's so corny. If indeed this is a part of, the branding for the WWE, I hope they got a lot of money for that product placement. But come on, let the guys do their own thing. Let the players do their own thing. I don't like it. I don't like it. I saw someone comment on social media that since the NHL doesn't make money off of their broadcast deals, they have to find ways to make money, and they're capitalizing now on this tradition of giving away a game puck. We saw Ebbs get one 300, what was it, 300 goals, I think. And Big Rig 600 points. So they're capitalizing on the fact that teams are creating content around this very specific moment, taking us into the locker room. I'm not here for it. I'm not a huge fan. I was a big WWF fan. I think there's a difference. We can talk about that maybe on another podcast. So I did grow up watching wrestling. I'm a little particular. 90s wrestling, that was the golden era for me personally. I would watch with my grandfather, so mi abuelo, it was a lot of fun. So that's one thing. I'm just not into it right now. That's me personally. Yeah, I don't know, man. Give us the hat back. So until we get the hat back, I don't know if we're ever getting the hat back. I'm gonna bring it back here. I'm not calling it a Davy Jones hat because this hat's not anything as cool as the hat that was given to to the guy just putting it all out there. But I'm calling it the Uma hat. Uma is a character from The Descendants, which is a Disney kind of whole universe where the children of Disney villains are trying to find their place in the world. Uma, the descendant, if you will, of Ursula. So I dressed up as Uma before I started this show. Those who listen to the show from season 1, I still have a soft spot in my heart for Uma. I didn't put in my extensions today, but I might have to wear them. And so I think I'm just going to bring it. I'm going to bring the hat out after a Kraken win, and I'll record the episode in my Uma hat. I'll probably decorate it a little bit more. It's looking a little plain Jane here. It's not Uma-esque. It's not Uma-esque enough for me right now. So I'm gonna do my part, right? To make winning unique and fun for us here at Locked On Kraken. Here's hoping I get a chance to bring out this hat. I'll have to take it on the road with me because I travel a lot. I'll be traveling again I'm hoping I'll be traveling again for the WNBA finals. So I'm going to get it together. I'm going to have like all of my Uma accessories. I've got the Pirates, sword belts. I've got the gloves, the extensions. They're all on brand for the Seattle Kraken. So I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And the guys, they got that belt. I guess it's very thoughtful. And that's really all I have to say about that. But question of the day, what do you think about the WWE belt? Did you like the Davy Jones hat? I mean, there might be people out there that didn't like that. And if it's not going to be a hat, if it's not going to be a belt, what else could be like quintessential Kraken? I have an idea. I'm not going to share it right now, but I actually think it's the best idea. So you're going to have to come back for the next episode of Locked on Kraken, where I'll tell you if I could give away a prize to the player of the game effectively, what I would choose and why. We're putting the Davy Jones hat on the shelf. We're putting the WWE hat or belt on the shelf. I think there's one token of appreciation that would be really, really fun. And I'm wondering if anyone can guess it. So I'm going to wait until later in the week to say what I'm thinking. But I think it's pretty cool. The Seattle Kraken will be headed home after we take on the Nashville Predators. You see that we have Philly, Calgary, Colorado, Winnipeg, and Carolina, the next 5 games at home. And I think I'll just say it this way. It would be perfect to debut what I have in mind for a homestand. But that is our show. Early assessment is we're kind of leaning into some of the Kraken crap that got us in trouble in other seasons past. This is a Nashville team that obviously is beatable, but the fact that they're looking for their first win makes them dangerous for a team like the Seattle Kraken that still has some work to do to solidify and synergize. Synergize to work on their synergy. Whatever. They have some work to do in the chemistry department. So I think it's going to be an interesting one. Game tonight, a game day against Nashville. It's going to be at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Central time. The Nashville Predators, will they get their first win of the season against the Kraken? I'm sure hoping not. And I'm sure hoping that Ellie Tolvanen has something to say about that, especially on the power play. Be kind to yourselves. Be kind to one another. Hold fast. Stay true. And loud and proud we say tonight, let's go Kraken. I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everybody.